So this afternoon, we'll speak about secularism with Timothée José. So I can just introduce himself very quickly. So Timothée José lives in Switzerland with his wife, Natasha, and their daughter, Agathe. After studying history, German and French literatures, as well as theology, and being part of IFI's national movement in several countries. He serves, as staff work with GBU, Switzerland, on one university campus, as well as a ministry branch called Dialogue and Truth, supporting undergraduate, postgraduate, doctoral students, and professionals in integrating their faith in their academic disciplines. Since 2023, Timothée is the IFIS engaging the university coordinator. So, good night, Timothy. So, we are really happy to have you with us, especially because it's late at your home. So, yes, thank you very much. So, I give you all the space.
Thank you very much, Jean-David. It's indeed very late here. It's 11 p.m., so I hope my mind will be fresh enough. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight or today, as it is Sunday afternoon for you. It's a great pleasure to join with the Caribbean region. I've never been there. I hope I can do something live in person at some point, because I'm sure the atmosphere there would be much nicer than just through Zoom calls and webcams. But nevertheless, I hope that what we will see and share tonight will be of interest to you and will be helpful as we share. So my idea is to provide you with some input, some sharing, and of course to leave the room for some questions. So if you have questions that pump up into your minds as I talk, feel free to just drop them in the chat bar, so that I can read them then and interfere with them, discuss them as we go ahead. So without further delay, I just would like to share some elements with you about, so Jean-David has introduced quite a few elements of myself as well. I just wanted to share a picture of my wife Natasha and my daughter Agathe to show you a few elements of my life. So several universities I've served and worked in, GBU Switzerland, which was the national movement I was first with. There is a tractor there because I really enjoyed driving tractors when I could. It's sadly a bit tough on time nowadays. I used to play some music, and you might have recognized some Japanese calligraphies on one side. This word is a Japanese word. I don't speak Japanese as well at all, but I have a good Japanese friend who's drawn that for me. It's called tsundoku, and the word tsundoku means piling up books before we have the time to read them. They have a word for this, and I found that absolutely fantastic. So I thought, okay, I need that on my shelf as well. So let's go further into the university, and I would like to have you join me for a second and share with me what is the university for you as you think about it. When I talk university, of course, I have to give a few more precision. I'm not talking just about the university, the big universities, and maybe some of you are not even yet at university, some of you are still in senior high school, My idea of talking about university is basically a place where there is higher education happening. So what I hope to say and to share today is really applying to you as well. How do you experience this life? Is it a joy? Is it a hardship? Is it something you really look forward to going on Monday? Is it something which is rather very hard? Is it something stressful? Is it something that you enjoy doing with God? Just put a few words in the chat and we're happy to read them. Sorry if I just disturbed your afternoon nap. So someone said engaging and informative, fun as well. Someone said a big step. What about the others? place of maturing. Stress, yeah, that's part of university life. Challenging at times. Place that tests every area of my life. Beginning of experiencing life, yes. Quite a few elements. Thank you. Can continue writing them on as we go, and we can continue discussing. I would like to share with you one story. It's the story of a man who was brilliant in his society, a man who was taken far away from his place of birth and had to study things he would never have studied otherwise. Probably hated it. Some of it was even forbidden by his original culture. He didn't have to learn that, but he had no choice. He was taken into exile. Of course, most of you probably have recognized the biblical figure of Daniel, who was taken to what we might call, just for the sake of the presentation, Babylon Central University. And on the right of the screen, you can see it is the model, a small model of a sheep's liver, where they had to study which part of the liver meant what, to understand what the gods may have told the societies where they were working. And under it, there are a list of dreams. If the king has such a dream, it means this or that. If the weather is like this or this, it means this or that. And friends, they really had to learn things that the Torah, the first books of the Bible, really forbid. They didn't have the right to study that kind of things. Yet, at the end of the chapter, we realize that Daniel and his friends were found 10 times better than all the others. That's quite striking, because we thought they might have just withdrawn into a small bubble just for prayer and not engaging with whatever they were being taught, yet they did so. But it doesn't mean they didn't set limits. As you can see from the picture, which is taken from a Sunday school book, they also refused some of the food. We don't know exactly the reasons, probably because it was food offered to the gods before being served at the king's table. But in any case, they also managed to draw lines. And drawing lines is not an easy thing. And I'm not here tonight to tell you this is the red line that you have to draw, this is the thing that you shouldn't do. My goal is basically to encourage us to discern, to pray, to see where God points his finger to help us discern. This is something that we need to value and to engage with, and this is something we better stay clear from. So, as a way of coming back, I'd like to share with you a few technical elements about what we mean by engaging university within IFES. Our basic mission statement is as follows. We encourage all the Christians to study and teach in the university, again in senior high schools as well, fully embracing the shared culture of university, sharing its pains and upheavals, affirming its God-given potential for furthering human flourishing, and discerning critically its idolatrous tendencies. So there is a culture which we need to understand, to know, to love to some degree, but also to criticize when this is needed. There is pain, there are upheavals, there are social problems. Of course, I'm not telling you how many problems there are here. Corruption, economic injustices, political problems, strikes, all sorts of things. But overall, what we want to say is that basically the university is a place that God also loves. Therefore, we should love the people who are there. If you want a shorter summary of this statement, let me try this way. Engaging the university very briefly. It means first, the world is God's creation. Of course we know this, but we need to remind ourselves of this. It means if the whole world is God's creation, it means that what we study is also God's creation. You'll tell me, but this is very logical. Yet, but how do you do it when you realize that some of the things that your professors are teaching you seem to contradict what you know from God? What does it mean? Is God surprised? Is God shocked? Should you protect your faith from what God is telling you now? Maybe not, because God knew it already. He wasn't surprised. He can never be surprised. At university, we also meet God's creatures. That means we meet people that God created and loves, but we also do study God's creatures, what human beings have been doing across history and are still doing at the present. Which means, as a conclusion, that university we love, we listen, we serve, and we speak. It's a whole program, I think, which is really engaging, which is really interesting, which is also a challenge because, as several of you have said, the university, the high school, all sorts of training that you might have during your life. This is always a time where you can mature what you can discern. One of the prayers that you could have, if you want, starting tomorrow, who knows, is when you enter a class, when you're about to learn a new subject, God, please help me see you through this. Help me love you and love my neighbors better as a result of what I'm studying. I'm not saying it's always easy. Sometimes it's a bit difficult. As a student, I was always struggling to see how God could on earth help me or get me to love math, because I hated math with passion. But I realized that math had actually taught me at least patience. I was never a good math student, but at least it learned me some patience. At university, friend, at university, we are also in a safe place. We can feel very much at home. Why? Because we're called. We're called to such. We're students. We are at the right place. When a scholar goes to Jesus and tells him, what should I do in life? What is the most important thing I should do? Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. Friends, let me ask you a question. Have you put as much energy into loving the Lord your God with all your intelligence, the same way you have given energy to love him with all your heart? Have you put as much energy into thinking about how the Lord might lead you and is teaching you through your studies? Or do you have one brain for Sunday and one brain for the week? I meet many people across the world who really struggle with this. How on earth is God also the Lord of my time as I'm a student? It's a very big question that we have to ask repeatedly. And then Paul says basically the same. Brothers and sisters, stop thinking like children. In regard to evil, be infants, but in your thinking, be adults. So, what it means, basically, that we are there called, equipped, encouraged, empowered to see the university as a whole. And what do we mean by the university, the high school as a whole? Is firstly people, undergraduate students, graduate students, but also faculty, research staff, administrators, workers. Friends, we can have a whole range of ways of engaging university, but it can really start tomorrow with you by saying hi to the cleaning lady, by saying hi to the person who gives you the food. Because in so many contexts in the universities in the world, those people who are just making life on campus possible because they do all the technical, the admin, the backstage stuff, they are often despised. Can we as Christians at least be those who will be salt and light in this way? Engaging the university sometimes means organizing big conferences, big events. Sometimes it means just saying hi. I had a friend who studied university sociology in Nantes, in Western France, in a very, very, very secular context. And when you study sociology in France, it's usually a very strong leftist corner where people are really rather anti-Christian. And some of his classmates said, Pierre, you're really a strange guy, because you say hello to the cleaning lady the same way you say hello to the professors. What's wrong with you? You don't really know how the social hierarchy works. And he said, no, because the lady who cleans, the guy who opens the doors, he's as well worthy of respect than the professor who has a lot of power over me. I found that really, really quite fascinating to hear. And universities, of course, also all the rest, all the program. Sorry, I went one slide back. It's the teaching, it's the research, it's the critical thinking, it's the tackling of big issues in scholarship and in the world. It means there is much more than just people, there is also the content. When was it the last time that during a Bible study, a meeting of your local IFES group, you have asked a question, what did you study today? And in which way did what you studied, what you learned, the professor you heard, the theory you studied, the program you ventured into, how did it show you to respect and to love and to appreciate God more? I find that quite fascinating a question to ask, because I think pretty much everyone can talk about it, especially non-Christians. And we can even ask the question when we are in the middle of studying a Bible text. What does this Bible text say about the discipline I'm currently studying? You still with me? Please put a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something on the reactions to make sure I'm still talking to people who are alive. So I see a few thumbs ups. You can put, I don't know if there are thumbs down if some people are bored, but I don't think Zoom allows that. So I'm safe. I'm safe with this. In other words, our attitude on the campuses is not that of a golden Kalashnikov. Sometimes I call the golden Kalashnikov the attitude that some Christians have. We really have to reconquer this world. We really have to put the power of Jesus on this campus. We really need to fight with the golden Kalashnikov with all the best apologetic arguments. But friends, this is not quite the way we're called to be going on campuses. As Uncle John Stott used to say, on campuses we rather love, go and serve. Because the temptation for us is to try to see whether we might be able to capture some ground, to envisage our place as Christians on campuses as a competition. And I don't think it's a competition. It's rather what we might call an intercultural mission. And by intercultural mission, I'm often I often teach in the West, but not only, in contexts where people envisage intercultural mission like this. And some of you will say, what a cliche. This is just terrible. An African tribe remote in the bush, and this is mission. Of course, it's still sometimes mission. But most of the time, mission is now like this. It means talking to this very strange tribe of students who are TikTokers, laptoppers, all kinds of things, doing things that former generations didn't do. But what is really common with those both approaches to mission is that usually when people go somewhere to serve the Lord, to present the gospel, the idea is that we have to learn the language, the food, to appreciate it, to learn the culture, how people work, what it is about respecting time, what do you do when you're invited, do you accept, do you refuse, do you wait for 3 times in order to accept in the last instance, how do you do those kind of things? Cultures is the way we do things here. But why is it that sometimes we don't really think that we have also to learn the culture of our non-Christian friends on campuses? Sometimes it's very hard. We think they're just so strange, they are not Christian, we should be really safe. Of course they do things that we don't appreciate. They do things which sometimes really strongly contradict what God wants us to do. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn how they think, how they work, how they dream. When is the last time you've asked your friends, what are you dreaming about? What are you most afraid of? Do an exercise with friends. You put a list and you just work. I'm afraid of, and everybody jumps in. This is my fear. This is my fear. Because of course we live in a fearful world. But engaging with people, their dreams, their fears, what is really bothering them, concerning them, is basically also helping us see in which way the gospel does answer those concerns and those questions and help us be more attuned to their realities. And some of you might ask, but what do we do if the university or the high school is secularized? So when Jean-David first invited me, he said, you really should help our Anglophone friends to understand a bit this very strange thing, which is the French laïcité in the French Caribbean islands. And of course, understanding laïcité is a whole endeavor in itself. It's usually translated secularism in English. It doesn't exactly overlap, but we'll still use it for lack of a better term. The basic idea to be sold against the tide. And of course, it is often difficult to understand for people who have grown up in the Anglophone world to understand this very strong separation of the church and the state, which is so integral to a lot of French citizens or even the French culture. I myself, I'm from French-speaking Switzerland, which means I understand the French culture quite well, but don't tell me I'm French, because I'm really not French. Don't tell me I'm German either, because I'm not German. So the Swiss were really a bit in the midst of the two, so we try to get the best of the two worlds. But in any case, the idea is really for you to try to understand tonight how this ambience, this atmosphere of secularism, as it is understood in French territories, really shapes the way that Christians relate to their public witness in the public sphere, but also even in private. So let me share with you a small video. Okay, so I'll briefly summarize it and then let the guy explain what laicity further is. The basic idea is to present this big law from 1905 in France, which is still a big thing that many people continue to discuss. And the idea is basically there is a separation between the church and the state. And what does this exactly mean?
Extérieure de la foi. Donc si par exemple vous portez une croix dans la rue ou dans le métro, ou si vous portez un voile ou une kippa extérieurement, qui marque extérieurement votre foi, vous exercez votre culte. Et comme cet article du Code pénal, qui était avant la loi 1905, a été mis dans la loi dans l'article 31, ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire que l'article 1, il peut se résumer de la façon suivante. La laïcité, c'est d'abord la liberté de croire ou de ne pas croire, sans pression, parce que s'il y a une pression, la personne qui l'exerce peut avoir l'amende ou la prison. Alors après, il y a l'article 2. L'article 2, c'est celui que tout le monde connaît, parce que c'est le titre de la loi, c'est la séparation des églises et de l'État. Et pourquoi il vient après l'article 1? Parce qu'une fois qu'on a dit qu'il y avait la liberté de croire ou de ne pas croire sans pression, Briand dit, et celui qui l'a aidé à écrire son rapport, explique que avant 1905, quand il y avait des cultes reconnus, si vous aviez une religion non reconnue, vous étiez infériorisé. Et si vous étiez non-croyant, vous n'étiez pas non plus respecté comme les cultes reconnus. Donc la condition de l'égalité des citoyens devant le statut du croyant et du non-croyant, c'est que l'État soit neutre. Mais une fois qu'on a donc dit liberté, égalité, ça produit 4 espaces. Là, l'État neutre. Il y a l'espace neutre de l'État, il y a le lieu de culte où va s'appliquer la règle de la religion qui le gère, il y a l'espace du domicile, où si vous voulez que les gens mettent des chaussons ou un chapeau quand ils entrent chez vous, vous faites la règle que vous voulez. Et puis il y a tout le reste qu'on appelle l'espace public. Alors il va y avoir des conflits. Il va y avoir des conflits sur est-ce que j'ai le droit de faire ceci? Et puis il y a des gens qui ne pensent pas la même chose. Et dans cette reconnaissance de la liberté de l'individu et de l'égalité de tous, vous avez une très grande diversité des options spirituelles. Donc il faut, le troisième volet, c'est la fraternité, c'est-à-dire trouver des compromis. Vous pouvez avoir le même type de discussion sur, par exemple, les repas dans les cantines scolaires. Si des enfants ne veulent pas manger du porc parce que c'est contraire à leur religion juive ou musulmane, eh bien, si vous servez du porc, il faut essayer d'offrir une alternative comme un repas végétarien, voire un repas à la loup-cachet. Mais il y a parfois des situations où il n'y a pas de fraternité possible. Quand, par exemple, il y a eu des pressions sur les jeunes filles perçues comme musulmanes pour qu'elles portent le voile de force, ça c'était au moment de 2003, de la commission Stasi dont j'ai fait partie, eh bien, il n'y a pas eu d'autre solution que de passer une loi pour dire la cause de la pression, un signe ostensible, qui était le voile, et donc tous les signes ostensibles ne sont plus autorisés dans les écoles publiques. Et pour les jeunes filles qui portaient le voile sans faire aucune pression, eh ben, elles ont l'option dans notre système de pouvoir aller dans des écoles privées sous contrat, qui même si elles ne sont pas musulmanes, ont l'obligation de recevoir des enfants de toute option spirituelle. Voilà, ça c'est résumé, et je vais dire pour conclure la chose suivante. Tout le monde admettra que la laïcité, c'est bien sûr le droit de ne pas croire. Mais pour avoir cette option de ne pas croire, quand par exemple on a été élevé dans la foi d'une religion, il faut pouvoir se sentir chez soi dans l'espace de la citoyenneté. Si quand on vous regarde, on ne vous ressent pas comme citoyen, mais on dit « Ah tiens, celui-là, on l'appelle par sa religion », eh bien on enferme des compatriotes dans le seul endroit où ils se sentent dans une maison, qui est la maison d'une foi. La réalité de la France et sa richesse, elle nous vient de ce que sont venus habiter le pays des personnes qui sont venues de notre ancien empire ou de pays voisins immigrés. Et donc cette histoire de l'empire et cette histoire de l'immigration, elle doit faire partie de l'histoire que l'on apprend, de une histoire qui s'intègre à notre histoire nationale et qui fait que nous avons une citoyenneté partagée.
So, I think a few things can be just summarized from this video, and notably the idea that the principle of laïcité really protects people. And I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong. I'm just saying that this is very deeply ingrained in all those who support this principle of secularism. The big idea is basically religion is at core an external imposition which is dangerous, and the state has to protect people against this potential pressure. And in order to prevent people from being pressurized, either by their parents, by a church authority, by anyone else, there is the idea, okay, no religious sign in a school. Because this is already seen as the person is not just a citizen, it is a religious person. Of course, this question of neutrality is very tricky because nobody can really be neutral. And by excluding religion altogether from this public sphere, it also gives people, it almost gives people the impression that religion is absolutely not important. And of course, this is to some degree unethical because human beings are at the core religious, whether they want it or not. So you see this, that's really a tension which is really strong here, but we really have to understand, because this is so strongly embedded in the psyche, especially of the French, because of this education, which is so long across the years, that any type of saying that, okay, we really want to bring a voice, we really want to be Christian for the public sphere, etc., is considered as a potential danger that we better keep at bay. This is why I think we really need to be wise and to be cautious. If you read what some of the big specialists of laïcité currently write, and this is in an article on in the Guadeloupe Franche-Comté journal from March this year, schools have been established as sanctuaries to enable children to form their own opinions beyond the influence of family, friends, etc. We need to allow children to form their own opinions in a neutral way. Children must be allowed to form their own opinions in a neutral way. That's why we need to keep a closer eye on young people. We now need to show the younger generation that secularism is not against them. We must not confuse racism, which exists, with secularism, which is there to protect everyone within a clearly defined framework. Because of course, in France, especially in the metropolitan area in continental France, there is often the discussion about whether laïcité is actually a racist device against the Muslims. This is of course part of the big social debate. But the idea, as you've seen in this sentence as well, is that schools are sanctuaries. So it's really interesting because you say there shouldn't be religious language in schools, but actually talking about the sanctuaries, a holy place, a non-religious holy place, is of course self-contradictory, and this is also something we have to see.
I have a question.
Yes?
Yeah. My question is, did you sympathize that we as Christians, as students, should to be able to indulge this secularism with others, should we be able to put our Christianity, the way we act, aside for a bit? Did you say that, or did I mean it for another way?
I'm not sure I've got you. Could you repeat, please?
My question. The question is, you said something about we should put something at the side. What is that really?
Oh, you mean I was not trying to say we should put our religious conviction aside. I'm saying that most school youth authorities want us to put it aside.
Oh,
And yeah, so that's not what we should do, but that's what they want us to do. So the very tricky thing is, of course, now to know how to navigate this, which I'm trying to explore somehow further. So when you go into French schools and other places, you have this big charter of laicity in school, and there are many points. There are 15 different points. I just wanted to share 2 with you to give you the best sense I could. On point 6, the Charter says that the secular nature of school provides pupils with the conditions for shaping their personalities, exercise their free will, and learn about citizenship. It protects them from any proselytism and any pressure that would prevent them from making their own choices. This is really interesting because we have to protect people. So to a certain degree, it's a bit paternalistic. So we have to protect people from external influence, but including external influence which might be within the school. So the big idea is, okay, if there is this big Christian group within the campus, it might actually be proselytizing. So we really have to keep them at bay. This is why in most schools in France, there is no way of having a Bible group meeting in a campus, or for sure not having any Christian staff worker come on the campus and talk with the students. So this is really a big difference from many schools in the Anglophone world, where it's really considered quite normal to have religious personnel talk to students and discuss with them, etc. It wouldn't be considered proselytizing, but this is where a big fear is there. It also plays, of course, within the framework of French history, where because of this influence of the post-colonial era, they are really afraid of Muslim attacks and Muslim terrorism. So they try to, in order to push Islam away, they tend to push the Christians away at the same time. So we also had that kind of stories in Switzerland where the Muslims wanted a prayer room, the Christians wanted a prayer room, and everybody was denied the prayer room because they didn't want the Muslims to pray. They wouldn't have had a problem with Christians. The question is whether Muslims and Christians would both fight together to have prayer rooms in their schools. That's a big debate that Christians also disagree on. The second point, quite interesting, the 12th. Teaching is secular. In order to guarantee pupils the most objective possible openness to the discovery of worldviews and to the breadth and precision of knowledge, no subject is a priori excluded from scientific and educational questioning. No pupil may invoke a religious or political conviction to contest the teacher's right to deal with an issue on the syllabus. In other words, there is no way as Christians to say, okay, this is not what the Bible teaches. Teacher, you shouldn't say that. Or teacher, you think this, but I know that. This is really something which is actually almost forbidden. The idea is also that we cannot refuse to study either creation, talk about Genesis, or it's forbidden to study the life of Muhammad or to study any other religious phenomenon or history. The big idea is really everything should be, of course, studied in a potential way. And how does it play out in practical terms? You have this big vademecum, as they call it, is a big official document which explains how teachers should deal with this secularism principle. One of them says, in life and earth sciences, it is important to explain the nature of scientific knowledge. Teaching transmits indisputable scientific knowledge, knowledge that has been argued, demonstrated, and verified. Beliefs, on the other hand, are the subject of a feeling of truth, but cannot be demonstrated. In other words, what can be believed does not fall within the remit of the secular world school, but is a matter for each individual's freedom of conscience. What can be known comes under the secular teaching of religious facts studied as facts of civilization. Of course, friends, I hope and think we could challenge that. We could challenge not by saying, oh, this is all wrong, we shouldn't deal with it because we have no choice. But we really should start questioning this and practicing Christian critical thinking about that kind of text is of utmost importance. Can we really say that teaching transmits indisputable scientific knowledge? Do you know what indisputable scientific knowledge is? It is called propaganda. There is no indisputable scientific knowledge, because the very nature of science, of scientific knowledge, is to constantly be debated, reviewed, argued upon, and sometimes changed. Sometimes it stays for a long time, but sometimes it's really changed. Science progresses, makes progress by being challenged and being discussed. So there is, of course, a large degree of overstatement in this. The idea is really, okay, there is belief, there is the world of belief on one side and the world of science in the other side. And I hope you remember some of my first slides talking about a Christian view on the university. We study God's world, God's creation. So the very possibility of studying God's world means that there is a creator God who has given us the abilities to do it. He's given abilities not only to Christians, but of course to non-Christians as well, because he loves them as he's created them. But it doesn't mean that because they refuse to have any relationship to him, it doesn't mean there isn't any. You see what I mean? So there is really here something that we have to consider quite strongly, that even if we cannot have a big speech, we cannot preach on campuses. In some of the campuses you can, in some you can't. Bringing a Christian voice doesn't always mean just putting Bible verse into a text. It really means asking other questions, being wise, being thoughtful, saying, okay, what does this mean for this and that kind of population, for the poor, for the oppressed, for the people who really suffer from such and such economic or systemic injustice, but also to consider the religious life of people, which is sometimes just neglected in any research progress or research program or historical analysis, all those kind of aspects and bits and pieces of work. But we really should make sure that even if the context is as secularized as it can be, it shouldn't follow that our minds get secularized and buy into this lie that there is real life and there is religious life. Friends, I think this is the worst thing that has happened in the Western world in the years past, that we have bought into what we call this sacred secular divide. I think this is really something we have to fight against. It doesn't mean, again, saying, okay, we should recapture the world for God, because we cannot recapture a world which has always been God's. See what I mean? But the idea is really to see, to say we have to relearn how to think Christianly about whatever we study, whatever we explore, whatever we venture into. Technically speaking, even on university campuses, as the CNEF, which is the French branch of the Evangelical Alliance, has said it, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and freedom of expression allow all convictions, including religious ones, to be shared on campus. There is no censorship of opinions. The principle of secularism, which applies to the university as a public service, does not prohibit discussion and debate about students' conviction, whether political, religious, or philosophical. Secularism guarantees the neutrality of the public service, not that of its users. It therefore does not prevent students from talking about their faith on campus, expressing their beliefs, or even informing others about the basics of their convictions or trying to convince them. In other words, there is really a place, there is opportunities, there is room for sharing our convictions. But we rather say, especially in the secular sphere in Francophone countries, it's often by putting a question, by asking something that people haven't thought about, and by doing it in one-on-one conversations, and showing that our faith is actually really relevant to the main drives, concerns, and aspirations of the people with whom we work. You've heard before mentioned those three principles that we call it the French Trinity of liberté, égalité, fraternité, so freedom, equality, and brotherhood. And Edward Nelson, who is a former Parisian pastor, has tried to write a book, a Christian book, on those three principles, showing how they really are very much in line with what the Bible teaches. And he says, we have equal status. Everyone is created in the image of God. This is absolutely powerful. There are none of those big values, big principles, which cannot be tracked back to what the Bible teaches. We have equality of condition. We're all equally miserable. We're sinners, we're hypocrites, we're unjust, etc. And it's really interesting to talk with some of the, especially the social justice activists. They often realize that themselves they are unjust. I'm not saying they're wrong in their activism. This is not my statement. My statement is that they often realize that they also do make compromises on their own values, which are not externally imposed on them. So it means there is this problem that we have to fight with our own personal values. This is what the Bible calls sin, which no other system of thought has really addressed profoundly. And of course, there is also the strong the strong element of the equality of destiny. We are justified by Christ, regardless of age, ethnicity, gender. So there are no big differences that cannot be overcome in Christ. And this is really powerful. This is something that the world cannot have and share. This is basically the model come and see. You remember in John 1, you have Philip and Nathaniel who talk about Jesus. And Philip goes to Nathaniel and tells him, you know, we found a Messiah. Nathaniel says, well, it cannot be the Messiah because the Messiah doesn't come from Nazareth and nothing good can come out of Nazareth. And very interestingly, Philip doesn't really argue with him. He says, come and see. And this is really, I think, a powerful model for us as we witness on campuses as well. What the Bible proclaims is not always easy to understand or accept. By walking with the spiritual family, you will have the opportunity to observe and verify whether the gospel really does change lives. In 2 words, come and see. To understand there is nothing like seeing it for yourself. And I think this is one of the most powerful values we can have as IFES groups on campuses, to show that the gospel does make a difference in people's lives. That it has transformed me, that it has allowed for ethnic reconciliation with just the imposed principle of secularism cannot achieve, because secularism can teach us to behave, to keep quiet on our internal motivation, but the gospel helps us to heal our internal motivations, and reconciliation is possible from the inside out, because God changes, transforms our inner beings, which no other system of thought can really achieve in any way. So a final story before we move on to a few questions. One of the very interesting elements is the example of HEC Paris, where there is really an interesting element, and Jean-David, this should not be online later in the recording. The GBU, the local GBU, wanted to have approval as student society, and they didn't quite know how to. So what they did, they basically tried to show how their own values would fit those of the school. So they took the list: curiosity, excellence, diversity, responsibility, entrepreneurial spirit, all values that the school really wants to endorse and to incarnate. And they showed that really all those aspects can really be found also in the activities of the local IFES group. And it's really interesting, because this is really quite subversive to a certain degree. It's showing, okay, what we do is not against the academic grain, even if this is a very economic-driven, secular school in one of the most secular cities in the world. But still, we need to have a place, because we talk the language that people can understand. Ultimately, our God is a God on mission. If you read the text of Ephesians 1, 4-10, you realize that everything which the text says here has God as a subject. He made the world. God loved us. God decided to bring us, to reconcile himself to us. Us to himself. This is what he wanted to do. So we praise God because he gave us his dear son. Everything together is to be reconciled under him. This is the end of this passage. This is the goal, friends. This is the goal of God's mission, to reconcile all things to him, who is our Lord and Savior. And this is something that the Lord cannot provide. This is the Lord that the staunchest secularists cannot foresee. This reconciled unity of human beings. This is what God achieves. And the question is how we might discussing as small groups, as communities, as churches, as local IFES groups, how we can discern what God is already doing, because there is so much already happening on the university and the high school campuses. People asking questions, people wondering, people thriving to get society to be better. Despite knowing that we don't know what drives people, what motivates people, why would people commit themselves to fighting against climate change? Why would people fight against racial discriminations? They do this because they know this is in line with what the God of the universe, the creator God that we love and who has loved us first, is pushing us and equipping us to be doing. Yes, friends, I think this would be most of what I could share with you in this very, 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 very short time. There are many good books that I could suggest you have a look into. At a personal level, I would suggest you to have a look in these books. The courses, Engaging University, Your Mind Matters by John Stott is always a very good book to go to in English. There is the Engaging the Campus, which is also freely available online on the IFES website. There is a good book by John Piper as well about thinking, Mind Your Faith. There are all sorts of very good books which you can have a look into. And as a group, of course, as Christians, we're also called to this double listening to God's world and to God's word, what is already happening on the campuses on which we are, as secular as they might look like, but as motivating as this can also be. And one of the tools that we have online, which is also an interesting tool that Jean-David and Karina might share with you, is this campus exegesis worksheet, how to analyze the campus, where is God at work already, as secular as it can be, as non-secular as it might be, in whichever context you work. These worksheets have been used quite often in many contexts already, and we continue to refine them. How to start looking at the campus the way God looks at it. You might remember, and this is the last Bible passage I will mention tonight, in Acts 17, when Paul is in Greece, in Athens. He's very angry because he sees how pagan the world is, how desperately foreign from God the people are. And the text says he was boiling from inside. Yet what happens then when he manages to talk? He starts off his speech by telling people, you are so religious, you so look for things. We could understand it as you're all a bunch of superstitious folks. This is not quite what Paul is saying. He said, there is something in you which aspires to know the living God. Let me try to present him to you. And he shows how their own poets are pointing towards who God is for them. So I hope, pray, and dream that as you continue witnessing on your different contexts in the Caribbean islands, the Lord might give you strength, encouragement, joy, a lot of joy. We shouldn't just be burdened by the task of mission. We should be joyful because we join in what God is already doing. We join in what God is doing on many campuses on the world, and this is where He has called you, and for what He has equipped you. So I hope this has been helpful. I'll be happy to take one or two questions if you want, if you have some, and if not, I will let you go into your further program. Thank you very much for your attention so far.
Thank you so much, Timothy, for sharing with us. Do we have any questions? You can either unmute your mic or place it in the chat. I saw Joshua is asking for the names of the books.
So I'm typing it. Your Mind Matters by John Stott is probably one of the best short books on the topic.
If no one have any question, maybe someone would like to share what is their takeaway from this session. Something that stood out to you.
I have a question. Should I ask or type it in the chat?
You can ask, that's fine.
Okay, so I was a social science student. I'm finishing my degree now. So I had to do philosophy courses, and that was always a struggle because I feel like in that class it was always basically anti-Christian, and I found that I had to be debating with my professor a lot because he was agnostic. So I know that we're talking about how to really, I guess, understand how God is using certain subjects, I guess, like philosophy. So I don't know, how do I go about subjects like that where really based on speaking and
Oh, you've muted yourself? Yeah. Social sciences and philosophy, right? I would need another hour or two to discuss this topic because it's a fascinating one. I sometimes tell humanities students are an unreached people group. I studied history and literature myself, so but we haven't started really thinking Christianly about those topics. I think essentially I would go about it by saying philosophy and social sciences are basically two approaches to studying human life. Human life is what God has created, and you can always see what is good, a value, whatever God has given, whatever reflects God's image in people, and also point towards what is bad. What we call this, the theological word for this is sin. And for many social scientists, it will be called alienation, it will be called social injustice, structural problems, etc., and so on, economic injustices, and one doesn't contradict the other. The Bible talks also about sin as alienation. It's not just Marxist thinking. And I mean, the most potent approach is probably just to ask questions, show that there are good Christian scientists who have discussed things and quoting them in papers, maybe without necessarily saying this guy is Christian, therefore I will quote him. So in sociology, for example, David Lyon has been a very strong Christian voice in the world of sociology. Discerning step after step, Googling social science and faith, see what happens, what comes. ChatGPT is sometimes even a good way of trying, of starting to see what the Bible might say about the topic. It doesn't always give good answers, but sometimes it gives you at least a prompt on this. And there are good books on the topic that you can browse and find online, or drop me an email. I can also drop in the chat. I can drop my email if someone wants to continue the conversation. You can reach me there. It's really not something to be abandoned. It's not because the professors are anti-Christian or think that there is nothing good in Christianity about their topic that this is true. It's actually often very wrong. Joshua is also asking, before I have to jump into the French Zoom room. It's Joshua asks again what secularism is at the very basic, because Charles Taylor has written this very fat 900 books about the secular age where he tries to describe everything. But the very basic is really the idea that we separate anything religious from public life. So everything religious should be private for your own sphere only, and don't even dare sharing it, and don't even dare say that your religious organization, church, group should have anything to say about life in public. This is at the very basic what secularism is. And of course, it does contradict what we believe as Christians, that notably that the gospel is public truth and that the Lord is the Lord of the universe. So if he's the Lord of the universe, he's the Lord of my school, is the Lord of my academic subject, is the Lord of my society and country. And how does it, what is the articulation of those two? It's often a small step of humble discernment as well. And as we have crossed midnight, I'm now talking to you from the future because I'm already on Monday. And I'll have to jump to the French room. Please do feel free, if the organizers give you a feedback form or something, feel free to be very honest and say what has been helpful, what has not been so helpful, that for a future occasion we might be better and more useful if this applies. I wish you all the best in your respective contexts and countries, and hope you have a good rest of the day and a good start in the new week.